Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
And it's Jeremy from Tested.
And welcome to a very special episode of Projections because we have the new Valve Index in-house.
You went and tried this a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
You flew to Valve's offices along with a few other very lucky people, and you had a chance to try it.
It's about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, not very long. And we talked about it previously in that hands-on video. Now we've had about a week's time with this, a couple days for you, a day for me, try different games. It's not out yet, so we're still considering this kind of extended preview, hands-on impressions, episode 2.
It's due for release in about a month. Okay, so what did you think compared to how you saw it up at Valve's offices?
I'm really glad I got more time with it because some things that I thought I remembered have changed. I think it's worth talking about specifically what's different about this headset and their approach. Like we've said before, this is Valve's own design. Like whereas previously they laid out the groundwork for the HTC Vive, but HTC did the manufacturing. Here, Valve is choosing the panels, Valve's doing the ID, Valve has all the say in this. They're shipping it themselves, which is a big difference. And
right, but I still think of the Vive as being Valve's headset. HTC did the manufacturing. This is very much like they've thought through all the design decisions that they made in the first gen, and they're rethinking things, and this is their second generation headset.
Yes, and from talking to the Valve engineers, it really became apparent that the origin of this design really started with the type of panels they chose, and that's really where we should begin.
Okay,
right?
so they went with LCD panels instead of OLED panels.
Yep, 2 of them.
Higher resolution.
Higher resolution than the Vive, but technically the same resolution as like the Vive Pro and what you find on the Oculus Quest. They're each 1600 by 1440 panels, but they are RGB stripe LCDs, which means you also technically get more sub-pixels for a clearer image, and you don't get that OLED, pentile arrangement.
Exactly. I have a feeling that OLED pentile arrangement, which we had for both the original Rift and the original Vive, is what lent itself to this screen door effect terminology that everybody uses, because it is like a screen door. It's triangular.
Yes.
They go like that, whereas this is much more of a grid, and to my eyes, the screen door effect is greatly diminished on this panel, on these panels. What do you think?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Now, since I first went to check this out, the HP Reverb, we've tested that already and reviewed that. And I will say the HP Reverb in terms of just how fine the pixels are.
You're talking about so many more pixels,
Yes.
2160 by 2160 for those panels. I mean, that's a massive number
Absolutely.
compared to this.
All my point is that there is still room for improvement. I agree with you that the screen door effect is greatly diminished on this headset. Now, what's also interesting is, of course, how they combine the panel here with the lens system to give you a wider FOV, a field of view. This is a big thing.
There's 2 big things, and you haven't mentioned the other one yet, but the field of view surprised me. Like, we had talked about the frame rate, and we will talk about the frame rate, and that's what I was excited for. But when I put this headset on for the first time, I said, wow, because I did not expect to be so much more immersed in the content. But it's only like another 10 or 20 degrees, right?
They call it around 30 degrees, but it's really tough to talk about field of view because that's really dependent on your own head, your eyes.
And how you have this set up.
How you have it set up. And that's how they get this wider field of view 2 ways. One, they actually angle the displays and the optics off center. They're canted about 5 degrees, which means you do get a little bit less stereo overlap. And it's slightly different, but it still looks like the same type of experience. And 2, the way you put it on, there's eye relief, which the original Vive had some eye relief. You could move the faceplate up and close. Here, this 1 centimeter of movement, which you on the side
Is
here.
it only a centimeter?
It's only a centimeter of movement.
Wow.
That you get here.
Because when you have it on, it feels more dramatic than that.
It does, right? You can get it all the way up close to your eyeballs, which for me, even wearing these glasses, my lenses weren't touching the internal lenses here. They were almost there. So you can, with glasses, you can get close. That's where you get the maximum field of view.
When I put it all the way to my face, like I felt like my eyelashes were almost touching those lenses. I mean, it's super close, but what you get is this field of view that is wider than anything that we saw in first generation, wider than anything even in what we've seen this year from Oculus.
Now, we will caveat and say there are other headset makers like Pimax who have done really wide field of views, the Starbreeze headset as well. What's different with this is that they're not adding that much to the periphery where they need to re-render the game differently.
Right.
You know, they're really just pushing the panels closer to you, and it does fill more of your periphery, but it's not wrapping all the way around.
Also, the stereo overlap, in terms of percentages, is not as good as the first generation, where I felt like in the original Vive, the circle that both of my eyes saw overlapped almost entirely. I mean, it's very, very good stereo overlap. Whereas this one, you get overall more of a field of view, but they do, as you said, they split them apart. So where maybe they overlap, the boundaries of the overlap is kind of where they were in first gen. You're now getting more in the periphery beyond that.
And when you have those lenses pushed right against your face, something I did notice is that in my periphery, I could see the edges of the display panel, you know, and which you have a Rift or a Vive and you push them right against, if you look around, you can see the rectangular panels, and you can see that here in your periphery as well. It's not distracting, it's just, it's there.
Some people probably, they ask about that because they don't want that. And I would say that if you don't, easily solved with this adjustment that pushes the displays away from your eyes, you can eliminate that entirely at the expense of field of view.
Yeah. Okay, now let's also talk about the other big improvement with the panel, which is the refresh rate. This headset runs at 120 frames per second, or in a beta mode up to 144 hertz.
You don't even know it's a beta mode, it's just available. They call it a beta mode because you told me that there's some occasional tearing, some inconsistencies between the two displays in that mode.
When I was using it, I didn't see any of that at all in the games I tried.
We're both running NVIDIA 1080 cards, which actually struggle at 144, so I was not in that mode very much, but I did try it. And my first question was, could I discern the difference between 120 and 144? And yes, and in fact, it's not that hard at all. To just do a quick frame rate check, you can jump into the Steam Home environment and just wave your hand. And at 90 hertz, you'll get so many hands as frames that go across your screen, and at 120, you'll get more. 144, even a few or more.
This is all configurable in Steam VR. You literally just go to settings, and there's a slider. You can even take it down to 80 hertz if you want, which is comfortable, but the difference between 80 and 144 is super noticeable.
Absolutely, but it's all a trade-off for how powerful is your computer.
That's right.
So if you have a massive graphics card, one of the new 2080s or something, you'll be able to hit 120 pretty easily.
Yeah, and of course, Steam VR lets you adjust the actual rendering resolution. The native for 100% was filling all the pixels here. For my 1080, I set auto, and it jumped to 68, 70% render resolution. I, of course, wanted to push it all the way up, and then use the compensation, use a reprojection to smooth it. There is motion smoothing, which is different than motion blur. Motion smoothing is just a toggle box that lets you just help compensate for any dropped frames. There is no motion blur in VR, because I think motion blur would actually cause a little bit of discomfort. It's like that post-process effect you see in more traditional flat
It works real
games.
well in flat screen. It's one of those things that doesn't translate that well. They also have a cool little tool in their settings app where you can actually see how many frames am I dropping? How often is it kicking in that motion smoothing to compensate?
I mean, it's a really interesting approach to a display panel because, on the PC side, gamers have known for a long time that having a higher refresh rate actually matters. People played games on 60 hertz for a long time, and now there are 144 hertz PC monitors with sync that are great, and some competitive gamers can't play without that. On VR, you have split philosophies. You have on the Oculus side, on the Quest, it goes up to 72 hertz and 60 hertz in some experiences. On the Rift S, it runs at 80 hertz, which you still have a sense of presence and it's comfortable. But I didn't know that you can get so much more out of 120, 144 hertz and feeling more present until I used the index. And it was hard for me to go back to 90.
I know what you mean. It's like the iPad Pro, which has 120 hertz for the scrolling, and once you start moving it just feels more like reality. And that's the thing, like this 120 hertz gives you a better sense of presence because it is more like reality, not in a spatial resolution kind of sense, but in a temporal resolution.
I also want to caveat that when we're doing our tests and moving our hand like this, you can see like it's not perfectly smooth. So it makes me wonder how much more could you push a panel? If a panel went to double, what is the limit of a human recognition for refresh rate?
What is the 8K per eye equivalent of frame rate?
Right, and I think we did some cursory Google searches, and some research has done to say that humans can see up to maybe 1,000 frames per second.
Right. Good luck, NVIDIA.
Yeah, right. But that would be, again, tremendous amount of processing required. But the 144, when trying all the experiences, I left at 144. I'm maxing out 100% scaling, and I'm just loving those experiences.
At 144, max resolution, you would have been dropping frames.
I was definitely dropping frames. In the Steam home environment, I was dropping frames. I was playing games like a Beat Saber and Space Pirate Trainer, which don't have a ton of graphical demands, and those games were perfectly good. But even something like Rec Room, and then there will be optimizations in the future. I did notice a lot of polygons. It was just like with HP Reverb, right? Like there are trade-offs here, and it makes me want a faster video card.
I will say, because it's an LCD panel, the contrast isn't great. Like you don't have those deep blacks that you get on OLED panels, so I do miss that from the original Vive. But resolution and frame rate more than make up for it. And
something I do want to talk about is the Godrays and also the sweet spot.
For the optics.
For the optics, something that, having just only a little bit of time previously, I didn't get a fuller sense of. And it's there. Like the Godrays are there.
Yeah.
And that sweet spot is, I think, comparable to the Vive.
It feels very first gen to me in terms of that, exactly what you said. It feels very, I was thinking like a Vive-y. It just feels like they brought the lenses over and made the field of view bigger.
And I know they said the lens configuration is different, but in result, at least on this unit that we use, right, like getting the sweet spot, once it's in place and once it's dead center and you have your IPD adjustment all done, it's great. Like you can move your eyes around, you can see really clear left to right, especially with the wider FOV. But if the headset moves a little bit and it falls off axis, then things start to get blurry and you got to readjust. And it isn't something that I'd notice with something like the Rift S.
Right. Yeah. While I wasn't blown away by the optics, I was totally blown away by the audio.
Yeah.
I feel like these speakers, and they are speakers, they're not headphones, are the best audio solution that I've ever experienced on a VR headset. They're awesome.
Yeah. So they chose to do like kind of over, not even over the ear, on ear, just like floating.
Yeah, they're like a couple centimeters away from your ear.
And there is a sweet spot for these as well, where you kind of adjust them. It's interesting that you can adjust them vertically and you can tilt them, but you can't kind of move them around like you could on like a Vive Pro, have a big range of movement. So maybe they really wanted to have it perpendicular to or parallel to your face.
Yeah.
But they are loud, they're bassy.
Oh, we had to lower the volume. Like not only are they loud, but they retain their, the fidelity at those loud volumes. I mean, these are quality drivers. But they also, because they're away from your ears, they allow people to speak to you. If they come into the room, you want to retain some connection to reality, they do that. But they don't do it at the expense of bass, low end. They sound great.
I felt that there was just something that felt more real about them. Maybe it's not having anything pressed against my ear.
Right.
It's like on the Rift S and on the Quest, where it just works and it sounds like the spatial audio sounds like it's in this room. Spatial audio here works great, but it was just fuller, and I just like the tone quality of the audio playing something like a vacation sim.
Yeah,
in here.
It's funny to remember that the original Vive didn't even have headphones.
I know.
They've made a complete reversal, and they've made like best in class.
Yeah. Let's talk about the fit of this. Headset design, there's so many different types of strap design. This one I'd say is kind of a cross between like the Vive Deluxe audio headset, Pro Strap, and something like the Vive Pro. One in that, there's a extendable band here. You rotate the knob in the back and that extends. But there is a generous pad in the front and the back. And I love that big pad in the back because it ensures that it cups around the back of your head. This is like the easiest mistake for someone new to VR to do, is not to cup the back of your head, and that makes the fit not as great.
Yeah, I mean, all the manufacturers have experimented with different types of foam. Even the Deluxe Audio Strap has pretty thin foam, but I was never terribly uncomfortable with it. This is actually very generous by comparison, and it's more comfortable. I like this a lot.
I love this material. Whatever the material they choose, actually you can pop out the facial interface. I can show it to you.
It's magnetically held in, by the way.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I think it's a nice touch because I have a couple people in my household that use VR.
Yeah.
We can get kind of sweaty sometimes. It'd be nice to have our own face that we just
They
drop in.
will sell these separately, and also the CAD will be available. People will want to design
cool.
their own. But whatever padding they're using, it's not exactly like your typical cotton. Like it doesn't feel like it's going to peel and fluff up.
Yeah.
And underneath it, it's almost like a really nice mouse pad wrist gel that's on here. So it's really, really comfortable, especially since it's pressed against your face on both the front and the back.
They also have this additional pad that you can throw in, and you told me that it was for smaller heads. I thought maybe it was for, my son might use it. I used it, and I actually think I prefer it because it moves the tension from the sides of the head strap on my personal head more towards the center.
To the back, you can kind of see that right now, right? Because when you put this on, the side padding doesn't touch your head and it spaces out, big amount of padding on the back.
Yeah, I have a pretty sizable head too. So like if I'm wearing a helmet, it's usually an extra large, and it worked with this pad in there. It still worked fine. There was still a little bit of room for me to take the headset off and put it back on very easily.
All right, from the back to the front, we've got to talk about the front. It uses, of course, SteamVR tracking. So underneath here, you have all those sensors that look at the lasers that fly around your room. But this panel here pops off also magnetically, and underneath here is what Valve is calling a frunk. It's a cavity for expandability.
With a USB 3 jack in it.
Type A.
And whoever wants to make a modification for the Valve Index, they're free to make a modification. I mean, it looks, initially I thought this was cleared for like a Magic Leap or something like that.
Leap motion.
That's right, yeah, of course, Leap motion that would do hand tracking in front of you, and maybe somebody would develop that. I don't know. I know that they had developed just an LED display that would go across front just for funsies. But it's neat. I mean, this is a company that knows the modding community better than anybody. And they have basically made an expandable VR headset. I think it's kind of neat. I can't wait to see what people do with it.
Right, they didn't have to do that. It's adding extra cost and development hardware. Same with the cameras out here. They're not for tracking, they're for computer vision. They're full color, global shutter, high quality cameras that you can see right now if you're in the Steam menu. You have that kind of window into the world for comfort.
Same thing that the Vive always did.
Yes, exactly. But we didn't get access to the software, the experiments they were running that would allow for some pass-through, some overlay on top of the world.
I wonder what that's going to be, right? They said that's going to be available later this summer. They're still tweaking the software, but is that going to be a full field of view pass-through?
From my demo when I was at Valve, it did not fill the field of view of the headset.
But you did see a stereo pass-through?
I did see stereo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it the same thing? Was like a square that hovers above your controller?
No. It was full. It was like slightly recessed from the field of view.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, because the cameras are in a different position than they are on the Vive Pro.
They are.
So,
but they're wide angle, and I guess they could realign. Right. Cable-wise, it is a tethered experience, and the cable is long. It's actually a little bit longer than the original Vive.
By about a meter. It doesn't come with a breakout box, though.
Yes.
It goes straight into the computer, but you do get this proprietary connector that connects what goes into your computer to the cable itself.
There's about an extra meter right here. It splits off, a little Trident cable to power, USB 3, and also display port. So it still requires external power.
12-volt wall board that goes into your plug, and then you plug it in there. I mean, they do have this USB jack on the front. I'm curious why they need that additional power and the Rift S doesn't.
Exactly.
I wonder what that is.
And there will be, for $40, an adapter that you can plug into here that will give you a virtual link and actually take the place of all three of those. So technically, if you have a video card that can support it and pass the power and data, that would be sufficient. This is just their standard.
At the same time, you're never disconnecting these. Once you're plugged in, you're done.
Yeah, exactly. Once these go in, that's it. I also like the quality of the cable. Having gone from different headsets recently, the original Vive to even like the HP Reverb, I don't like the flat cables. On the Vive, it's like three cables kind of joined together.
Right.
And while they're the same length, it doesn't coil up as nicely.
No, you have to coil in the direction that it wants to.
Exactly.
Right.
And when they drape in my room, like they kind of stack and sometimes get wound up. This is more like kind of on the original Rift, which is one solid cable. And I just like that. It's a slightly better design.
Of course, the whole system supports Steam Tracking 2.0, and this full kit came with 2 of the trackers. Neither of us used them. We didn't have to because it's completely backwards compatible with Steam 1.0 lighthouses if you already have those set up in your room, which we did, and there was absolutely no problem using those.
Absolutely no problem. This just gives you a wider tracking, more objects, maybe for location-based experiences. We need them. I found for the home, I'm pretty good with the 1.0s. Let's talk about the controllers.
Yeah, because this is a big deal.
Yes.
These were in development for years. We had Will come on the show quite a while ago with one of the first developer kits, and they've evolved since then even. They used to be called the Knuckles controllers. Now they're officially the Valve Index controllers. And wow, are they an improvement over the original Vive ones. I mean, if this were to become the de facto standard, if for whatever reason this was the new touch controller for Oculus and this was just what everybody wanted to use, I'd be totally fine with that. It's a really great controller.
I think we should talk about fundamentally ergonomically how it's different and then also functionally the potential here. Ergonomically, of course, you are no longer having to hold on to something firmly the whole time. It has a strap here, which is cool because you can adjust for hand size. Like there are a couple different spots here. You slide here, and what I found is you don't need to have this super tight. You press the button for release, have it medium tightness.
Because it is elastic, like it does grip your hand. You don't have to strap it down.
Yes, and it's the same soft material as on the headset. So ergonomically, being in games, and any game of course supports this because all it means is that you don't need to hold the controller, just being able to relax your hands.
Yeah, and there's no strap to put around your wrist, like a safety strap. It's inherently built into it. So now because you can let go, there's no more holes in your wall or broken TV screens, thank goodness.
Yes, and then functionally, there are just so many sensors on here. I mean, let's run through them. You have your typical buttons, right? You can press. There's a thumbstick, which also is a button you can depress. You have an analog trigger, of course. The trackpad that was on the previous Vive controller is the functionalities retained, but the design is different. It's now kind of like an oval. It looks like you should only be able to slide up and down, but it still works left and right, which is curious.
So it's still clearly a touchpad. It's not just a vertical meter.
Yes, and it also has a sensor on it, so you can press down and you get faux feedback. And then they call this the Capsense Sensor. And these are capacitive sensors where it tracks the 3 fingers from middle ring and pinky finger when they're on and off and calibrates it in real time. Plus, there's a force sensor in there for gripping.
Right. Yeah, so that's quite a lot. You didn't even mention that all of the surfaces up here, all the buttons, are capacitive.
Right, yeah.
So just like the touch controller, if you tap on them, if you don't even press them, you just lightly touch them, the system knows that. And it's just like everything that you do with your hands is now mimicked. It's like on the touch controllers, it was kind of binary as far as like your pointing and gestures that you could make. Now it's when you do this in game, you do this in game.
Yes. Now, games are supposed to technically just support this out of the box, existing Steam VR games, because all of the buttons here and all the interfaces are mapped to the original Vive controller.
Yeah, and that is hit and miss for me at best. I mean, I had a very hard time in Rec Room turning because, for instance, on the original Vive controller, you would swipe left and right on the touchpad. It's very hard to swipe left and right on the touchpad, and that's the only way to turn. I almost wish that, and they would never do this, but I almost wish that the default compatibility mode was to make these look like touch controllers, because then that would work fine. You got a joystick, you got your 2 buttons, and you're probably pretty good to go.
And you can remap in the software. Now, developers are working to build in support for the finger tracking in their games. So a couple of experiences we're able to try out had the finger presence, right? So like Vacation Simulator, your gloved hand, actually your fingers could come out, which is, you don't need it for the actual gameplay.
No, not for that gameplay. It's just a little further immersion.
Yeah, exactly.
But there was a game that actually did incorporate it.
Exactly.
That's Valve's very own sort of onboarding game.
Yep. Aperture Hand Lab.
Yeah.
They call it. It's like another version, of the lab, and it's in the Portal Aperture.
It definitely
world.
Feels like it. It's fantastic. It's typical Valve, quality. Voice acting is phenomenal. The graphics are great. The animations are all there, and it's just an excuse to make you do things with your controller that you've maybe done before, and definitely in some cases haven't done before.
So you were saying that there was one part of the experience you loved where you were fooled. You were asked to shake the hand of a robot, and you went and did it.
Yeah, I hope I'm not alone here because one of the robots asks to shake your hand, you reach out and you grab, as you do in many games and in Vacation Sim and other games. You're now grabbing things by literally grabbing. So I reached out and I grabbed his hand, and he said, "That's great if you want to give my hand a nice little gentle massage, but if you really want to shake someone's hand, grip it with force." And so that's when I realized that it really matters how hard you squeeze this.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool. I mean, that then becomes a way that you can grip things and pick them up, and it actually has a better impact on what you're doing in game.
I mean, it makes me think about what developers can do, because right now, in a lot of games, I'm just going to use like shooting games, for example. Yeah. There are basically two ways to think about how you hold like a weapon, right? You can either have it be a toggle where you grab something and it's stuck to your hand, you don't need to press the grip button, or you can have it in like a game like Robo Recall on the Oculus, where you have to hold the grip button down, because once you let it go, you drop the gun. Here you have an extra state where you can rest your fingers and that acts as a grip, but if you squeeze it, maybe that changes a gameplay variable. Like that gives you better aim, like more control, less recoil or something. Just another option for developers to incorporate into the game design.
It's just more like reality. It's like, when you do like a location-based experience that has peripherals that you can actually reach out and touch, this ability to let go and grab things is now a lot more parallel to reality. So for instance, in Vacation Simulator, you walk up to the telephone, you reach out, and you literally pick it up, and you hold it up here. For all I know, I'm holding a phone. I mean, it feels the same way as it would if I was gripping a rotary phone. It's just more like reality, and that's fantastic from a VR interface standpoint.
Right, one of the things, the verbs that Valve talks about that you'll be able to do with this controller is the pinch action, being able to use your thumb and index finger to grab something, and with the force sensor, be able to grip it. I didn't get enough of that in the demos.
Yeah.
I don't know how comfortable and natural that's going to feel, so I'm really curious what they do with that in the future. The other thing with finger tracking is you can now do things like rock, paper, scissors.
That's fantastic, and that's another part of the onboarding software, Hand Lab. So yeah, another robot comes out and he wants to play rock, paper, scissors with you, and you literally play the game. I mean, you can win it, you can lose it, you can have ties, and of course it's even more fun just to not throw anything out and see what he says, but it gets it. Like throwing out scissors, paper, rock, and you're playing the game.
Developers have had the Knuckles controllers, or now the Index controllers, for a while, and some of them have built-in support. And you're able to play a game, a melee game, Shadow Legend. What'd you think of that?
Right. It was basically any game that has built-in support actually plays really, really well. And this is one where if you have a sword at your hilt, you literally grab the sword, again, using this mechanic, and it just feels right. Like, this feels like the hilt of a sword. I'd be perfectly happy wielding it in the same way that it used to a Vive wand, and now you're gripping like this, but the fact that you're literally gripping it makes sense. I mean, the Vive used to have buttons on the side of their wand, but it wasn't the same thing. It wasn't this capacitive, like, force-sensing grip.
Even games that don't have direct support, being able to just relax my hands, I felt like really just made me more comfortable, made me able to stay in experiences longer. Like just go in the lab, for example, the Valve series of demos, there's an archery game, and having these Index controllers in the archery game and be able to relax my hand on that bow, it just made it more fun.
Well, exactly with Vacation Sim, one of my favorite things is that gym teacher who's in the ocean, and she wants you to bring her all different balls and you bring her the beach ball and you play. You basically not catch, but you pass it back and forth. It's fantastic because now I'm actually playing like I would in real life. My hands are open and I'm playing like this with the ball and I'm hitting it like I normally would, and I got a better score that way. I don't know if that's just by coincidence or what, but it just felt right.
It does, beg the question of now there's different amounts of input parity. Even there's no input parity going forward between the ecosystem, the Steam VR ecosystem. Like some people just have more options. So it'd be like, one, what the killer app is, we have no idea, and two, what that experience will be like. Will I be okay playing with an existing touch controller or the Vive wand versus this?
I do hope that there is a way to, by the time that they release, I hope there's a way to configure what the default controls are. How does it map to an original Vive controller if the developer hasn't taken the steps to integrate support directly for the Index controllers?
And that's the thing, like even though we've had a week to use this, there are so many questions to be had. There are optimizations that they're gonna do on there, and the software isn't fully baked yet, right? So in the time between now and when this ships, hopefully we'll get more sense of that. But this is available for pre-order in North America or US and Europe, and it's $1,000 for the full set. If you you just want the headset, $500 for this. If you just want the index controllers, $280 for that. There is a bundle, $750 for the headset and the controllers, and the base stations I think are $150 each. So that's what's available right now. We'll be doing more testing of this as we get closer to release date. But if you have questions about Index, about the controllers, about the experiences, things that we may not have picked up on, please come along the journey with us. Ask the questions in the comments below, and we'll do our best to test those ahead of release. But that's it for our extended impressions of the Valve Index. Let's call it episode 2. I don't expect there to be an episode 3.
Very clever.
We'll do a review next time. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.